and anatake advantage ya hiyo. It is important to know that you can make an application in court to manage that person, to be given an order to manage their property. But remember, ukipewa ruhusa na koti ku manage property ya mzazi mgonjwa ambaye haezi jifanyia kazi, hiyo siyo license ya kukula mali yake peke yako, because you are answerable to court. It's very important to mention that because I've seen in between situations where mzazi yuko ni mgonjwa sana, hajafariki lakini haezi jifanyia chochote. It is important to understand that you have a right to, you can approach court and get a letter to manage their property as they handle their medical bills. Tuko pamoja mpaka hapo? Okay. So, when you are engaging your lawyer in case you have such a situation, engage your lawyer from a point of knowledge. Umwambie nimekuja sababu mzazi ni mgonjwa na hawezi jifanyia mambo yake, na ako na pesa na niko na report ya daktari kuonyesha either ako na Alzheimer's disease ama yuko na dementia, lakini tunataka kumsaidia kutoa property yake kulipa bills za hospitali. On top of that, there is other situations we face which are also rare, but related to the law of succession, but not quite within the law of succession. One such situation is where you have a loved one who has a disease of the mind. In law, we say a disease of the mind to mean a mental illness. You don't want to put it a mental illness because it brings, sometimes it can be interpreted very badly. Because other people would say ni mwendawazimu, which is not a really good thing to refer to a person as mwendawazimu. It's a disease of the mind. Same case applies. If you have a person who has a disease of the mind and he or she had property before the disease set in, you can also apply to courts to get a letter to be able to manage their property. And I had a situation like that one about 10 years ago of a girl whose mother had a mental disease, and we were able to take her through school up to university. That is enough by way of introduction. Sasa tunaweza enda kwa the law of inheritance. Are we together up to there? Yes, it's important that we engage. Of course, I may not invite people to ask questions because sometimes people want to hold back their problems. Watu hawapendi kuweka mambo yao kwa public, but in the future, if we have a session, we can probably have questions in advance so that we can address questions without referring to the individual person who asked the questions. That is, we conceal the identity of the person concerned, but we answer the situation. Now, having understood why we pursue succession, a person is deceased, the second step we need to know is, what does the law of succession involve? Sheria ya urithi inahusiana nini? That is the next question we ask. And there are three things to look at. The first thing is the law of inheritance relates to who is going to inherit. That is a major question. The second issue is what property is going to be inherited. The third question is, in what proportion is that property going to be inherited? And lastly, what is the procedure to be followed to inherit that property? If tukiweza kuelewa sheria ya urithi hivyo, mambo inakuwa rahisi. Number one, nimesema ni nani anatakana kurithi, nini itaridhiwa, itagawanywa namna gani, na ni procedure gani tutatumia kuwa na hiyo urithi. Let us start with the first question. Who is supposed to inherit? Now, under the law of succession, there's a breakdown of people who should inherit properties. Number one is wife and children. The wife and children of a deceased person are direct beneficiaries. Hao wanagawa mali ya aliyefariki, na si lazima waonyeshani yate walikuwa wanamtegemea kabla afariki. Kwa sheria tunawaita primary dependents. So kama ni bibi na mtoto, mzee afariki, wanagawa mali na si lazima waonyeshe mahakama kwamba walikuwa wanamtegemea aliyefariki kabla afariki. And the same case involves husband and the children. But for husband, I'll make some qualifications much later. The next set of people who would inherit are parents, step-parents, grandparents, grandchildren, stepchildren, and children who the deceased had taken as his own. Wacha nirudie tena. Kategori ya pili ya watu ambao wanarithi ni wazazi wa kambo, wajukuu, ndugu, dada, ndugu wa kambo, dada wa kambo. Lakini hii kategori ya pili ndio warithi lazima waonyeshane walikuwa wanamtegemea aliyefariki kabla afariki. And in law tunawaita secondary dependents. Group ya kwanza si lazima waonyeshane walikuwa wanamtegemea aliyefariki. Group ya pili ni lazima waonyeshane walikuwa wanamtegemea aliyefariki. Kwa leo nataka to concentrate na hii group ya kwanza, children and wives. You will note deliberately I'm leaving husbands, and the other day there's an evangelist from St. Ninians who was at Neema where we go to church who asked me why I'm concentrating on wives and children and I'm not mentioning husbands, and that was deliberate because I want to give information in very small bits. Tupeana hii information pole pole mpaka ieleweke, because it's important that people understand this. A lot of money is going to dealing with questions which should never have gone to court in the first place. That is the reason I've taken it upon myself to make sure that this information gets to the people in the simplest way possible. Now let's come to wives first. Now ideally, vile sisi hufikiria ni ati bibi, wife, ni ule ameshika marriage certificate ama ule ametolewa dowry. That is not where the law ends. Being a wife, kwa sheria huwa tunasema it's a question of fact. Ukikuja useme mimi nilikuwa bibi aliyefariki, mahakama inakuuliza uko na ushahidi. Question of fact ni swali ambayo lazima utoe ushahidi ndio uonyeshane ulikuwa bibi. Na kama ulikuwa bibi na ulifanya wedding hapa kanisani, unatoa marriage certificate, unasema certificate ndio hii. I celebrated a Christian marriage in a wedding in church. Okay? But it doesn't end there. You may have been married under customary law na mulienda mkafanya zile mambo. What we normally do, if it's Kikuyus, we have Rorashio and all the other ceremonies. If it's Kalenjin, we have Koito and the rest, and all other communities have that. Now, therefore, a wife is a question of fact. It must be proved. Kama mtu atakuja kupinga wewe ulikuwa bibi, lazima utoe ushahidi. But pia sheria ya inheritance, sheria ya urithi inasema even former wives are treated as wives. That is, kama ulikuwa umeolewa lakini mkaachana na bwana yako, lakini hamkufanya talaka, you didn't do a formal divorce, then you're still a wife for purposes of inheritance. And that is an area which brings a lot of questions, a lot of court argument. The situation we've had is situation arising from conflict in marriage laws. Tumekuwa na cases ambazo mzee alikuwa na bibi na walifanya wedding ya kanisa, lakini huko nje akaenda akachukua mke mwingine na akafanya system ya tradition, akaenda akalipa mahari secretly with his friends, na wakapata watoto. Now, kwa sheria ya ndoa, the Marriage Act, huyu mke wa pili sio mke. It's not a wife. Kwa hivyo hawezi fanya divorce. Na hawezi staki mzee kugawiwa mali mzee akiwa uhai. Let me say it in English. If your husband conducted a Christian marriage, that marriage is supposed to be one husband, one wife. It's a monogamous marriage. He has no capacity to contract a second marriage for as long as the first marriage is there. Is that understood? But secretly, he goes out and gets a lady and he pays dowry under customary law. The second customary wife is not a wife because this man had no capacity to get into a second customary marriage. Okay? So the second wife cannot go to court and ask the husband to give her matrimonial property for as long as mzee is alive. However, if this man dies, the law of succession recognizes the second wife as a wife for purposes of inheritance. You understand up to there? Now, the reason why I'm insisting on that is that I get arguments from ladies, very genuine arguments that, look, I have a certificate, she doesn't. She was married after I was married, so she cannot come to inherit. Remember, if she can be able to prove that dowry was paid for her when Mzee was alive, then she is a wife for purposes of inheritance. The only challenge such ladies have is proving that dowry was paid, because in most of the cases it's done in secret, and the procedures for paying dowry are quite disjointed. But as a matter of principle, if payment of dowry and other traditions are fulfilled, the second lady married under customary law is a wife for purposes of inheritance. And we're answering the question here, remember, who is a wife and who is supposed to inherit? Remember, don't forget that that is the first question we are answering. Twende situation ya pili. A husband and a wife celebrate a Christian wedding here. Again, remember we said a Christian marriage is supposed to be one husband, one wife. Ndoa ya Kikristiano ni ya mume mmoja, mke mmoja. It does not permit a second wife, but he goes out there and probably he backslides, or probably he had backslidden and he came here for purposes of wedding only. And he lives with another lady simultaneously with the lady that he married here. Wanakaa huko nje, amemkombolea nyumba mahali, ama amemjengea, wako na watoto, amemwekea kaduka ama biashara, anasomesha watoto wake, wamefungua account moja, and they hold themselves out there as husband and wife. Now, there is a principle in law called marriage by presumption. Mumekaa na mume, lakini hamjafanya ndoa, lakini mnaishi kama bibi na bwana. Mko na watoto mmoja ama wawili, amekuwekea duka, mko na biashara, mmefungua account moja, anakuja kwako, anakuja huku kwingine. That is a marriage by presumption. And for purposes of inheritance, this lady who lives with the husband without a marriage is considered as a wife. Remember that. And for as long as you remember that, we will avoid that line of arguments that nimemjua leo. While his friends can come na watoe ushahidi waseme fulani alikuwa anaenda kule, hawa watoto ni wenyu, hata mnaona wanafuanana na hawa wengine wa ndoa, that kind of thing. And it's a very common thing. Are we together up to there? Okay. Now, what normally happens if I can marry the two? Ile kitu huwa inafanyika ni mzee anaenda, amefanya wedding hapa, anaenda huko, then anafanya customary marriage, lakini haifanyi vile inatakikana. Kama ni ya Kikuyu, badala atoe 99 sheep or 99 goats, whatever it is, anatoa kama 30. Kama ni Rorashio, if he's supposed to pay say 100,000, anatoa kama 10. So it's an incomplete process. Lakini wanaishi kama bibi na bwana. So what the courts have done over the years is to presume that hawa ni bibi na bwana under marriage by presumption. We okay up to there? So there's a fusion between customary marriage and marriage by presumption in the Law of Succession Act. We are together up to there? Perfect. Let us touch on something else. Let me touch on the challenges which come with customary law. And I'm touching on the challenges of customary marriage because I have had instances where people people in church, very genuine people, stay here, but they have not formalized their marriage. Then once the husband is not there, allow me to use husband because that is my experience. I'm not saying that ladies don't die and leave husbands, so don't get me wrong. Allow me to use that example for purposes of making things very simple. The challenge we get in proving a marriage under customary law arises especially where we have a marriage cross customs. Take, say, a Kikuyu and Kalenjin. And this is a live situation I think I had a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago. Under Kikuyu system, we conduct our customary marriages kulingana na customary za a lady. Or we normally say, you will pay dowry to my daughter the way I paid dowry for the mother. That's how it works. So such a system is called matriarchal. We follow the woman's line. But you go to Kalenjin, I hope I'll get this wrong because I'll get this one right because that is the experience I've had in court. The system is opposite. You follow the system of the man, patriarchal. Now, if someone comes and says that my husband is Kalenjin, I'm Kikuyu, we conducted our customary marriage under Kalenjin customary law, and someone else comes and says, no, it was supposed to be done under Kikuyu customary law, how do you resolve the conflict? It gets very challenging. And I'm saying this because I would want to encourage anyone who probably would want to plan their estate. It would be a good idea, even if we put the factor of money constant, because sometimes weddings can be very expensive, just have it, bring your civil marriage certificate here and gets blessed. Mchungaji is here, I'm glad that he is. I know you can make it very cheap, but someone appearing on a Thursday afternoon with his witnesses and you funganisha them and that's it. Isn't it, Mchungaji? Yes, it can be very cheap. And I'm saying that because I think I would encourage people to have it a little bit more organized, to make sure that the people you leave behind do not suffer trying to pursue the properties that you left. That's much for the meaning of a wife. But that is not all, because every case that I encounter brings its own set of challenges. We had a challenge, I think sometimes in 2016 or 2017, in some Kalenjin custom called woman-to-woman marriage, where a lady is brought into the family and she bears children for purposes of her family because of incidents of infertility. Then the question becomes whether that person who's been brought is a wife for purposes of Law of Succession Act. Those are unique challenges. That is the reason why I'm saying, ile nawaambia saa hizi, it's not everything Every single case brings its own set of challenges. And if we ever have another interaction, I think I would prefer we have a set of questions without naming the source of the question so that we can address the question and leave the identity of the person asking the question, right? Thank you. Let me mention something about children, watoto. The simplest way to say it is that a child would be a person born of a couple within the course of their marriage. That is the simplest way to put it. But there are other instances where you meet, but one of you had a child before you got married. If you take that child into your marriage, and you treat that child as your child, then for purposes of succession, that is a child who is supposed to inherit. Let me say this in a simpler way. Kabla ya ndoa, either mzee ama mama alikuwa na mtoto. Maybe ni yule mtoto alipatikana na accident when you are in high school or when you are at the university. But mom at home decided to hold the baby for you, umalize shule, then you can move on with life. Ukifunga ndoa, ulete huyu mtoto, muishi na yeye kama mtoto wako, then mzee aondoke, huyu mtoto ambaye mmeishi na yeye ni mtoto wa hiyo ndoa na anatakana apate urithi. Is that clear? Okay. These are not unusual things. This is very, very common. And it doesn't paint anyone in bad light. You know what? Sometimes when you speak about these things, mtu akisikiza anasemanga hizo zinafanyikianga watu wengine sio sisi, until it hits at your doorstep, then when you realize that this information was important. There are some times when in the course of a marriage, you adopt a child, okay? There's a whole procedure for adopting a child. If you adopt a child legally, that child becomes yours. So for purposes of inheritance, that is a child who's supposed to inherit. Give me 1 second. So an adopted child is a child for purposes of inheritance. There are other times when you bring a child into a marriage, but you don't adopt that child. But throughout your lifetime, you treat that child as a child of your own. Umeleta mtoto, maybe umepata mtoto ni wa sister yako ama ni wa brother yako, lakini brother yako amekufa ama sister yako amefariki na unaona hatuwezi mwachilia hivi, unamleta. You treat that child as a child of your own. Amelelewa huko, umemsomeshea huko, kila kitu ni wewe unamfanyia kama mzazi. For purposes of inheritance, that person is treated as a child for purposes of inheritance. We're clear up to there. Twende kwa grandchildren, wajukuu, or I think for those who understand Kikuyu, tushushunato right? We get that. Now, as a matter of legal principle, grandchildren cannot inherit from their grandparent. Wajukuu hawezi rithi kutoka kwa nyanya ama babu, unless waonyeshe kabla nyanya ama babu wafariki, yeye ndio alikuwa wa maintain. If kama mjukuu alikuwa anasomeshwa na babu ama nyanya, alikuwa anapewa mahali pa kuishi, alikuwa anapewa chakula na nyanya ama babu, then nyanya ama babu wafariki, hao watoto wanatakana kupewa kipande cha urithi wa nyanya ama babu. Lakini kama hawakuwa wanakuwa maintained na nyanya ama babu, hawawezi rithi. So grandchildren cannot inherit unless they are being maintained by their grandparents. But there is an exception. And this is how it goes. If a grandfather or a grandmother dies, and she or he had a child who died before him or her and left a grandchild, then that grandchild can inherit through the mother or father. Let me repeat it again. It sounds very complicated. Hapa kuna nyanya, na hapa kuna mtoto wake, na hapa kuna mjukuu. Huyu mtoto ndiyo mama ama baba ya mjukuu, lakini amefariki. So kumewachwa mjukuu na nyanya. Okay? Nyanya akifariki, huyu mjukuu anaweza kusimama kwa viatu za mama yake ama baba yake, then arithi kutoka kwa nyanya. Hapo tumeelewa? If there is anyone who hasn't understand, just ask me the question now that today is Sunday. If you come on Monday, Millicent will charge you and you're going to pay me for the service. So just ask the question if you can. If you've understood that, then anytime you're engaging with your lawyer and the question of inheritance of a grandchild comes in, if the grandchild is inheriting through the parent, then that is clear and it's possible. If the grandchild wants to inherit directly from the grandparent, that is not possible. Okay? Perfect. Let me go to the next step, the property which is supposed to be inherited. Now, mali ambayo yanatakana kuridhiwa, it's called free property of the deceased. Mali ambayo haina kesi. Kwa hivyo kama mali iko na kesi, kesi lazima imalizike kwanza. Okay? I'm mentioning this because we have seen situations where people file burial disputes thinking that if you are allowed, if you're the one who will have your way in burying the deceased person, wewe ndio unatakana kurithi. And this normally happens especially with people who've been living with a deceased person, yet they don't have a formal marriage. The presumed wives and wives married under customary law, when there's already a lady who's married under the Christian system. Unaenda kotini, unasimamisha mazishi, na kwa mafikirio yako unafikiria, wewe kama utawekwa kwa obituary, ama kama utawekwa kwa program ya mazishi, then lazima utarithi. That is not the case. The body of a deceased person is not a subject of inheritance dispute. There is no property right in the body of a deceased person. Huyo mwenye amefariki ni mwili yake imefariki. Hiyo mwili sio mali ambayo inatakana kuwa kwa kesi ya urithi. I've mentioned that if property is subject to a court case, that is not supposed to be inherited. You have to wait until the case is over for you to inherit any property. Now, things which may be subject matter of inheritance include land, money at the bank, shares of a company, government bonds, treasury bills, etc. The list is endless. But there are some times where the deceased person had benefits arising from a circle, and I've seen this commonly with deceased teachers, where they have benefits from TSC. In most of the cases, a person is named as a next of kin to take those shares. In that case, those shares are not subject to succession in most of the cases. But remember, as I told you earlier, each case is handled in its own unique set of circumstances. There are some times where it may be, you may be named as a next of kin, but then the question of whether you are a wife or not becomes contested, and it goes to court. But as a matter of legal principle, if you're mentioned as a next of kin, you're given those benefits directly. And it applies even mostly to some pension funds. I've seen also some pension funds where you are allowed to inherit directly without having to go through the succession process. Now, let us look at what is the meaning of free property of the deceased. I've seen situations where a deceased person has a company. Nyinyi kama familia mko na ile kitu inaitwa family company. And that family company has property. Kama mko na kampuni inaitwa XYZ, the wife is a shareholder, the husband is a shareholder, and some of the children are shareholders. Then the man passes on. Remember, property which is in the name of a company is not free property of a deceased person. The only thing which can be free property of a deceased person in such a situation is the shares that he held in the company and not the property held in the name of the company. Should I repeat that? Let me repeat that in simple language. Hii ni kampuni. Kwa hiyo kampuni, mzee ni shareholder na mama ni shareholder. Mzee ako na share 10, mama ako na share 5. Lakini hii kampuni iko na shamba ama iko na nyumba mahali. Ile kitu nimeona watu wakifanya ni succession ikifanywa, hizo mali ambazo ziko na jina ya kampuni zinawekwa kwa succession. That is not right. Mali ambayo iko na jina ya kampuni sio ya aliyefariki, hiyo ni ya kampuni. It is not free property of the deceased. Ile kitu ambayo inatakana kuridhiwa ni shares, hizi share 10 za mzee, hiyo ndiyo mali ya mzee aliyefariki ama mali ya mama aliyefariki, sio mali ya kampuni. Hapo tumeelewa vizuri? Okay. The next thing I'd wish to mention is that if you inherit the shares of a deceased person in a company, still you have no right to vote as a shareholder in that company. Ukirithi shares za mtu aliyefariki, wewe hauku immediately shareholder. Lazima ufuate sheria za hiyo kampuni. Sheria za kampuni ni separate na sheria za succession, ndio ukue shareholder. Ile kitu utaweza kupata kwa niaba aliyefariki ni profits ama dividends ambazo kampuni itatengeneza ikifanya biashara yake. So hata mtu akipata barua ya succession hawezi kimbia kwa kampuni kusema sasa nimekuwa shareholder wa hiyo kampuni. No, it doesn't work that way. Let me go to the situation which I think will be the last, because I already think I've given too much information. Sometimes it gets confusing, although I'd want to give everything that I know. But let me mention something before I wind up. And again, let me remind you, we are dealing with what property is supposed to be inherited. Nini inatakana kuridhiwa. Okay? Don't forget that. Sometimes you come with an allotment letter or a share certificate of a company and say that that is land that you have in that company. Allotment letters are some letters you get before you get a title deed. Share certificate, for those who are aware of land buying companies, and I think most of us know land buying companies and the share certificates they normally give. Kiamunyi before titles were issued, Kiamunyeki on the other side, they used to give share certificates. If you hold such documents, allotment letters and share certificates, it is important that first you convert them to title deeds or certificates of leases before it's too late. Because an allotment letter, and this is something the court has said, is not a title deed. If you go home today and you have an allotment letter and look at it, it requires you to do some things before you're given a title deed. And if you don't do the things that are supposed to be done, are supposed to be done within that allotment letter, then you don't have title to that land. So it's important you look at that. So an allotment letter cannot be called property. It remains an allotment letter. A share certificate does not give you land. A share certificate only gives you shares in the land buying company. And what I've seen is that when there are some people who are not very strict, when they realize that someone has passed on, they use that share certificate number to get the land. So you're left with the share certificate with nothing, but someone is holding the land which you were supposed to inherit. So just take note of that. Share certificate and receipts from a land buying companies do not give you right to land. They give you just shares in that company. Allotment letter do not give you a right to land until you convert them to title deeds. Now, very finally, there are certain situations where you have a case against someone and he passes on before the case is over. Okay? And all of us have seen these. Uko na kesi, mtu ako na deni yako, lakini kabla kulipe deni yako ama kesi ishe, anafariki. Okay? There is a procedure which is followed. Anapewa barua za koti. Barua za koti zinatolewa either kwa mke wake ama watoto wake ama mume wake ama watoto wake, ndio wanasimama mahali ambapo yeye alikuwa amesimama kwa kesi, so that instead of recovering money from the deceased person, you will recover from the people that he has left, either wife, husband, or children. Those letters do not take as long time as the other ones. It's something you can get in less than 1 month, and it's a very simple procedure. I also wish to mention that if you happen to have a succession case which is not contested, ile yenye haina mabishano mengi, you can probably try to go through the public trustee, agree amongst yourself, and the public trustee will deal with the legal aspects. The reason why I'm saying this is that sometimes law can be very confusing, and if you come to a lawyer like me, I think cost will be twice or thrice as much. But if you go through the public trustee, the procedure is simpler, and the charges, I think, are way less. So if your succession case is not disputed, you can try and pass by the PC's office, the provincial headquarters, and go to the office of public trustee and see whether they can be able to help. In case they cannot be able to help, then that is the time you can take the next step and go to your lawyer of choice and have your case handled. Especially if your succession case does not involve a lot of property or a lot of money, or it has no complications, you can try and go through the public trustees. The next bits that I'd wish to present, but not right away unless I have your permission, is proportions in which property is supposed to be inherited and the procedure for inheritance. But I usually say that if we give so much information, it has a way of leaving confusion instead of enlightening people. If you permit me, my hosts, can I stop there?
Bwana asifiwe. Si kama bado wako na kitu waendelee? Yeah? Hai.
Okay. Let me highlight, give very brief highlights on the proportions of inheritance. Sorry. Oh, I actually forgot to ask whether there's anyone who would want to ask me any question before I proceed. Okay.
We are thinking, siamalize kwanza, alafu tumuulize maswali.
Okay, thank you. I'll give brief highlights on the proportions of inheritance. And now, in my experience, the question of proportions of inheritance, that's where major disputes arise. Hapo ndio vita mingi inatokea. Because most of us, probably myself included, we have probably this sister you leave at home or this brother you leave at home, staying with mom or dad, and particularly for brothers who feel that ladies, women who are married should not inherit, and under Kikuyu customary law because they're likely to inherit from the other side. Most of us have those ones, and I think it's something I've experienced over the years. I think that issue has been dealt with many times by the courts. If any man thinks that the ladies who are married should not inherit from the estates of their fathers because they're likely to inherit on the other side, the earlier they forgot that, the better. There is no greater right of a person to inherit just because of their gender. You can't say that I am a man, so I'm going to inherit the entire estate, or I'm going to inherit everything alone just because I'm a man. So in case you have a brother or a sister there who thinks that they have a higher right to inherit, the earlier they forgot that, the better. Now, proportions in which estates should be shared. There is no straight answer for that because families are different and situations which arise are also different. The simplest is a nuclear family where a deceased person leaves a spouse and children. Allow me again to use the example of a deceased husband leaving a wife and children. The law is that the wife has a life interest on the property, and upon her demise or remarriage, the property is supposed to be shared equally among the other children. Let me say it very, very simply. Na mnikubali tena nitumie example ya mzee. And I'm right on this one because the life expectancy for men, myself included, is lesser than that of ladies. I mean, that's the standard in this country. Mzee akiondoka awache mama na watoto. Hiyo property ambayo imebaki, sheria inasema mama ako na life interest. Kwa wakati atakuwa uhai, hiyo mali ni yake. Lakini akifariki ama aolewe tena, hiyo mali inagawanywa na watoto equally. Clear? We're clear on that? Okay. Now, the other example I want to give is where a loved one amefariki na amewacha watoto. In such a situation, hiyo property inatakana kugawanywa equally kwa watoto wote. Sawa? That is when a deceased person passes on leaving children only, then the property is supposed to be shared equally amongst all the children. Now, let me go to a complicated scenario. And I say it's complicated because it has presented all sorts of problems for as long as I've been in practice in the law of succession. Polygamous families. How do polygamous families arise? they arise first if someone is married under customary law. Customary law allows polygamy. So you can have one up to so many wives. The maximum I've seen is 11. The minimum I've seen is 2. When a deceased person dies and leaves several wives, if he married them under a system which allows polygamy, that property is the property that he leaves behind is supposed to be shared in houses. And the house means wife and children. Wacha nirudie tena. Polygamous ni bwana akona bibi wengi. Hiyo tulikuwa tumezoea ile ya, say like my grandfather had 4, someone else's grandfather had 3, 2, etc. Hiyo ilikuwa kawaida when marriages were contracted under customary law. That was usual. So, but there are other situations which give something which is like polygamy. Ile yenye tuliongea hapo mbele. Marriage imefanywa hapa, lakini tuko na zingine hazijulikani huko nje. That is a polygamous situation. Ama imefanywa hapa, lakini kuna mzee ameenda huko, wameishi na a lady or 2 in a way that wanaonyesha ni kama bibi na bwana. That is another polygamous situation. And I'm saying this because ladies, again, very genuinely sit knowing that I will not have any complications because I have a certificate, I'm the only wife. Only to find some court documents saying that there's a lady somewhere else with children, or there are ladies elsewhere with children. It happens quite often. And as I said earlier, all of us think that these kind of things happen to other people. They don't happen to us until it hits at your doorstep. That's when you realize I needed this information. Now, in a polygamous situation, a house is the unit of inheritance. Mali inagawanywa kulingana na nyumba. So nyumba ya bibi A na watoto wake, hiyo ni nyumba moja. Nyumba ya bibi B na watoto wake, hiyo ni nyumba ya pili. Lakini inagawanywa kulingana na namba ya watoto na kama bibi bado wako hai. Let me say that in English. The estate of a polygamous person is shared amongst the houses, taking into account the number of children and the wife. So that kama nyumba ya kwanza iko na bibi na watoto wawili, nyumba ya pili iko na bibi na watoto 6, nyumba ya tatu iko na bibi watoto 12, inaenda ikigawanywa kulingana na namba ya watoto na bibi. In most of the cases, it brings about unfair distribution, especially to the houses which have lesser children. Therefore, what the law has said is that the property is not shared equally, it is shared equitably. I sincerely don't know how to put it in Kiswahili, but I will put it anyway. Equally ni kama hii chupa imejaa maji, kila mtu anapewa kiasi sawa. Hapo tumeelewana? That is equal. Kama ni say a piece of cake, kama tunagawanya kila mtu anapewa kipande sawa. Okay? Equitably is different. Hiyo ni kusema kama hii chupa iko na maji, wale wako na kiu kubwa watapewa maji mingi. Alright? Wale hawana kiu sana watapewa maji kidogo. You get the difference between equality and equitably. Let me put it differently. Suppose this stand is available for all of us. Then suppose there is a person who is half my size. If we were to say that we are sharing this stand equally, kila mtu atakuja asimame hapa, lakini mtu mfupi atakuwa hapa. Okay? Equitably would mean huyu mtu mfupi atapewa haki yake, apewe stool, akanyange ndio tutoshane. You get? That is the difference between equality and equity. Equity means taking into account the unique circumstances of everybody. So the law says that the estate of a polygamous person is supposed to be shared equitably amongst the houses, taking into account the number of children and a surviving wife, right? In practical terms, what does that mean? Tuseme bibi wa kwanza ako na watoto wawili, wamemaliza shule, wako makazi. Tuseme bibi wa mwisho, watoto wake wote wako shule. Equitably would mean we take into account hawa watoto ambao wako shule wakati tunagawanya mali ya, okay? But still it would mean huyu bibi mkubwa wakati walikuwa kitafuta mali na mzee, they worked the two of them. Yule alikuja baadaye. So you have to balance the interplay of all those circumstances to arrive at a fair distribution of the estate. That is just one example of how complicated situations arise in polygamous situation. But the basic principle that you want to hold on to this so that you can engage your lawyer from a knowledgeable point is that the estate of a deceased person is shared equitably amongst all the houses, taking into account the number of children. And equitably means fair and just. Sawa? Okay. Now, before I finish up on that, I'd wish to mention something. And I'd wish to mention it as an example so that you can understand how it arises. Take a polygamous situation, and these are live cases that we're handling, where the man married the first wife 20 years ago. And they acquired property for the first 5 years, and they didn't acquire any other property. So the man went into other things, probably became sick or did not acquire any property. But even after not acquiring other property, he married 3 other wives. Okay? Then he passes on. Would it be fair for these other wives who were married subsequently to have the same share as the first wife? It's a question which has been arising many times. Remember 2 things. Number one, when you are living as husband and wife, any property that you acquire is called matrimonial property. If you have made a contribution in terms of unapikia mzee akienda kutafuta, unaangalia watoto unawapeleka shule, una make sure mzee ako sawa ndio aende akatafute mali mzuri, that is contribution to acquiring that property. But hii contribution yote ambayo umefanya, hao wengine pia watagawa. That is another question which has been arising in division of property within polygamous families. And the question which we've been answering recently ni kujiuliza, kama hii mali tulipata, mama alipata na mzee wakati walikuwa pamoja ni matrimonial property, hawa wengine kabla wagawe, si tunatakana tutoe kipande kimoja kwanza mama apewe, alafu ingine yenye inabaki wagawane. That is a question which is still pending, and I think it's a question which is probably headed to the Supreme Court in the course of this coming year. But it is something I needed to mention to you so that at the back of your mind you can understand that for the scales of justice to be balanced, some things may have to be taken into account. But what I've seen with particularly the older women is to forget about it altogether. I had a particular case, I think, out of a station in Narok, where the lady said that she doesn't want anything. If it's a polygamous situation and they want to take everything, she said she doesn't want anything. It reaches there when you realize that your mental health is way more superior to fights over property. But at the back of your mind, it's important we understand that. Allow me to stop there because the next topic would be the procedure followed in inheritance. And that is its own bowl of soup. It's so long. Let me stop there, then probably I can take a question or two before you get tired. I'm not going to use Kikuyu. My Kikuyu is very bad.
Bwana asifiwe. Makofi ya bwana wakili. Tuta take few questions Steve ako hapa. Ni vizuri naona
Hamjambo. Jina langu ni Shadrack Wahome. Swali langu ni hili. Mimi ni mzee na gari langu ni la deni. Chaba lenye naishi ni la deni. Niko na deni kila mahali, banks, na maybe nilale. Hawa watu wangu watarithi nini? Sina title, sina logbook. Hawa kuna kitu watarithi? Asante.
Allow me to take 3 questions at a time.
Asante bwana wakili, 2 questions. In a scenario where a deceased husband has left the wife and children, and maybe he had written a will before he died, does it hold any water, that will that he had written? Second, we have seen many people fighting for a deceased, just as you said, and we have seen deceased being buried at night, maybe very early in the morning, just to fight for that deceased person. And you said the deceased or the body doesn't hold anything. Do they do that without any legal part of it? Because I have seen it severally happening. They fight for the body. Who has the burial permit and such things. They have been doing this for several. Do they do without, just from the ignorant part of it, or they know what they are doing? I don't know. Although you had talked about it, but still it's happening. Yeah.
Asante sana bwana wakili. Swali langu ni kuna husband ambaye amepass, amewacha bibi, na huyu husband alikuwa amechukua loan na property zenye alikuwa nazo, na bibi hajui, lakini sasa bwana amekufa. The wife hiyo loan amechukua kwa bank. Sasa the bank inakuta the wife inamwambia mzee alikuwa na loan, anafaa kulipa. Is it proper for the wife to pay the loan?
Allow me to answer the 3 questions. Let me start with the will question. Was it your question? Who asked the question about the will? Oh yeah, it's in there at the back. Your questions were the will and the burial disputes. Now, and I'm glad that you asked that question. The question of the will would fall into the procedure for inheritance, and that is why I said that is its own bowl of soup. Nani anaelewa Kikuyu? Nani haelewi Kikuyu? Is there anyone who doesn't understand Kikuyu? I just mix. I can mix, eh? In Kikuyu, we normally say will ne kuigaya. Sindio? Ugikorwo wigaite no ukarumirira mitaratara ĩrĩa ĩkoragwo igĩtwo nĩ igoti nĩ watho ya kwĩgaya, ukandĩka wega kĩrĩa kĩragaywo na ugakorwo na airaku na magacaina na ugathiĩ watigĩra ugacagũra mũndũ ũrĩa ũkaramata indo ciaku ũngĩkorwo ũtarĩ ho. Ĩyo nĩ njiganu. So ĩyo nĩyo ĩtagwo will, na wĩna will ĩyo ũmĩtwaraga igoti-inĩ. Ona wamĩtwara igoti-inĩ kwĩ bomu ũkũiyũria, cigatwarwo kwĩ jaji, ukaheo marua ma kuga muramati ũyũ watigĩte wacagũra nĩwe ũkarũgamĩrĩra indo ciaku ũngĩkorwo ũtarĩ ho, nĩwe ũkũrũgamĩrĩra na agayanie andũ aku. So tugaga ĩyo nĩyo ĩkoragwo ĩ njĩra hũthũ ya kũdila na estate ya mũndũ rĩrĩa muoyo, nĩguo ũkageria kweheria haro cia ciana na mũtumia ũngĩkorwo ũtarĩ ho. Ndacokia kĩũria gĩaku?
The wife, I think in such a scenario, the wife will be in a disadvantageous situation, sababu unaona hasa the husband ameandika will na pengine hakuconsider the wife ambayo wanakaa naye sana.
Okay.
I don't know.
What we normally say is that when you're writing a will, you have freedom to deal with your property the way you want. So if you decide to disadvantage your wife, that is up to you. But still remember, if you disadvantage the wife, she can challenge the will in court and say that I was disadvantaged. But as a matter of legal principle, you have a right under the law as the person making the will to dispose the property in the best way you want. I've seen situations where people have given 90% of their estates to trusts and children home and leaving only 10% to the wife and children. And we have had all series of cases. So we normally call that one testamentary freedom. Wĩna wĩyathi wa kũgaya indo cia kũrĩa wothe ũkwenda, no mũndũ waku angĩkaigua atĩ nĩ wamũhinyĩrĩirie no athiĩ igoti-inĩ challenge will ĩyo. It's a very difficult process to challenge a will, but it happens. All right? Let me go to the second question of burial disputes. It came from you as well. What I wanted to say is that there is a big distinction between inheritance and burying the remains of a deceased person. Burying the remains of a deceased person is a right of the immediate family members to give a deceased person a decent burial. But the misconception which comes is to think that if I fight and I'm able to hold the burial permit and the death certificate, then I'm a direct inheritance. Forget about that. If you don't fall under the category of wife or children or other dependents like brothers, sisters, stepbrothers, stepsisters, etc., whether you hold the burial permit or the death certificate, you still won't inherit. And that is the law, right? Let me go to the next gentleman. I think it was him. Sorry, please remind me your question because I think I've taken too much. Very briefly, then I'll get the grasp of it.
Nilikuwa nimeuliza ya kwamba niko na deni kila mahali.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I got your question. Uko na deni bank, gari ni ya deni, shamba ni ya deni, nyumba ni ya deni. Okay? Sasa unauliza ukifariki watagawa nini? Kuna kitu huwa tunaita net estate. Okay? Net estate ni kusema ile kitu itabaki ndio watagawa. Kama gari ni ya 1 million, deni ni ya 500,000, toanisha hiyo, yao ni 500. Kama shamba ni ya 10,000,000, deni ni ya 500,000, net estate ni 500,000. Okay? But we have other situations of technically bankrupt estates. Mtu amekufa lakini technically he was bankrupt. I had such a situation in my earlier years of practice. Uko na biashara inaonyesha net profits and net capital. Sorry, gross interest and gross capital inakuja kitu like 50 million. Lakini ile deni ilikuwa kwa deni ya income tax accrued na deni ya VAT accrued ilikuwa inafika almost 60 million. So mtu aliyefariki zile vitu wanabakisha ni deni ya another 10 million. So kama hiyo hata hakuna point ya kuapply succession because uta-apply succession uanze kufuatwa na madeni. You get my point? So in a case where the net estate is negative, then they have nothing to inherit. So the only thing they can depend on is their own efforts. Okay? Hapo tumeelewana? The lady, please, the lady right at the back. Nikumbushe tu just so that I can refresh my memory.
Nilikuwa nimeuliza mzee alikuwa amechukua loan
Yes.
lakini akakufa.
I got it. Anauliza, for the benefit of this side, mzee alichukua loan na mama hakuwa anajua. Sasa alichukua loan na nyumba. Then akishafariki banki na kutumia barua ya kukuambia mzee alikuwa na hii loan na tunakuja kuchota nyumba yako. We had, the first time we had those cases was before the new constitution in 2008. And we really fought. It is normally a very nasty situation to be kicked out of your house, especially after your spouse has left you. But I'll answer your question in two ways. If you had given your consent when your husband was taking a loan, you are taken to know that there's already a loan. And therefore, if he has not paid that loan, by the time he passes on, then the bank will come for the property. Remember, the bank does not need to go to court to come for the property. So it doesn't need even to get letters of administration. You will be the one to get letters of administration. Wacha nirudie tena. Tuseme kama kabla mzee afariki alikuwa amechukua loan, na wakati alipokuwa akichukua hiyo loan ulimsainia form inaitwa spousal consent. Spousal consent ni ya kusema huyu ni bwana yangu, tumejadiliana na yeye, tumekubaliana atachukua hii loan na ameichukua, na mimi kama bibi yake ninajua. Asipolipa then utakuja kuchotwa. But there's an opposite situation where the husband goes and secretly takes a loan, mostly from microfinances, because I know most of the banks are insisting on consent from the spouse. Takes a loan from a microfinance, na anapeana title deed, na anasema huku ni kwangu. Some of them are even going to an extent of getting some person there and passing off as the wife and gets a loan. If you never gave your consent as the wife when the loan was being taken, then that loan is supposed to be nullified and you're not supposed to pay a single coin. But that is a case which is slightly, and I'm saying slightly, outside the law of succession. So if I was to handle such kind of a situation, what I would do is first get you letters of administration to be able to sue the bank, then sue the bank to nullify the loan, because if a loan was taken using the family property without your consent, that loan is illegal from the beginning. Correct? I hope I've answered your question. Let me take the next three series of questions. Let me take two because I think I'm speaking faster than I'm thinking.
I'm Paul Kehumba. My question is this. I have two questions. One of the question is, you said equitably the living wives, they share equitably what belongs to the husband. What about if one of the dead wife had children? That is one question. How is it shared? The second one is the first wife and the husband walitafuta mali na wamepata. After just a short time, mzee ameanza kulete wengine. He did not buy another property. And now, the three wives are living in that property. The man dies. They have children. What happens? Thank you.
Let me answer that because, allow me to answer that because that is a big one. Let us start with scenario number one. Equitably amongst the families, but one wife is dead. I want you to listen very, very carefully because this is important. Equitably means fair and just, okay? Equitably inamaanisha kwa haki na kwa usawa kulingana na vile familia ziko. I hope that is understood. Number 2, in a polygamous family, it is not the wife who inherits. It is a house. Okay? And a house means children and a surviving wife. Okay? If aliyefariki alikuwa na say nyumba 3. Bibi wa kwanza tuseme kwa bahati mbaya amefariki, amewacha watoto. Watoto wenye wamebaki ni house. Hawa wanagawa. Watoto wa hii nyumba na mama yao kama wamebaki ni house, wanagawa. Watoto wa nyumba hii ingine na mama yao kama yuko wanagawa. So they cannot fail to inherit just because their mother is not alive. Understood? The next question was, okay. The next question is, just one moment, let me just finish doing that. Whoever is passing on the mic, this side, I think they should be given their fair chance. His question, swali lake ni, kuna mume hapa na mke wa kwanza. Wamefanya kazi, wamepata mali na wameseto hapo. Then after wamepata mali, huyu anachukua wake wengine lakini hawapati mali ingine. Hawa wake wanakuja wanaishi kwa hii mali yenye ilipatikana kwanza. That is the question I addressed lastly, and I said it is a question which is it's new. Ni kitu inatokea saa hizi. But the approach we have taken, and I'm telling you something which is alive, and I know for sure it's headed to the Court of Appeal, straight to the Supreme Court. The approach we've taken is, huyu bibi wa kwanza atakuja hapa asimame aseme hii mali tulipata na mzee. Okay? So hii ni matrimonial property. Kwa hivyo niko na share yangu hapa. Hata kama ni 1/3, hata kama ni 1/4, lakini niko na share yangu hapa. Kabla mgawane chochote. Lakini hata wakati mtakuwa mkigawana hii ingine 2/3, bado niko hapa kama bibi. So navaa viatu mbili. Navaa kiatu ya matrimonial property na navaa kiatu ya succession. Okay? That is the question. Hiyo ndio swali tuna deal nayo saa hizi. It is very new, and what I can say is that I cannot give a definitive answer because koti bado hazijasettle hiyo swali. But you can see the justice of the situation. In Kikuyu, the way I hear ladies saying, because I've spoken with quite a number of elderly ladies, wanasema twathukumire nake ni ahikiriria gi. You get, it sounds very bad, but ni ahikiriria gi na maraika raido ini iria twathukumire. So akauga ici twathukumire nake ri ni kio gitu, no wone herari kio giakwa kiambe kieherio niguo kio giki giake giatigara ri tugayane ithuothe. You get the point? That is generally the argument that we are trying to put across. So agekorwo mutumia say tuge ari mwarimu kwe besha arutire makigura buroti na roni, kwe besha arutire buroti no magura makimiaka, besha icio arutire cirio haha na itingituika na ikugayana tondu muthe ni ehera aya marokiri orori na guthiri kindu marutite ri mari ethithiro ya mutumia uyu mukuru. That is the question we are dealing with. Okay? Not definitive. Remember, I'm not giving a definitive answer. I'm giving you the arguments that we're putting across. But it's a very new question. It's something we're trying to develop right now. Yes. You can take the mic as we finish so that we can take questions from the other side.
In some clans, when the Mzee dies, there are some clans that are given a lot of responsibility within the family, their families. Yes. What happens if now the clans come in, and now, as you have said, the wife complains and they say, the property tulinunua na mzee. Now, then the clan says, yes, we agree ulinunua. Kile tutafanya, tutatenga kiasi fulani yako, ile itabaki tutagawanya nyinyi watatu. And you find they go ahead. The wife does not complain. She agrees. And then the property, she has 2 shares, as you have said. And now, some do not comment, but some decides to go to court. What happens?
Okay, thank you. Wacha nielewe swali yako vizuri. Kuna clan imekuja imekaa kama wazee. Wamesema hii ndio clan yetu na sisi tutafanya hivi. Wewe utapewa share zako na hawa wengine watapewa share zao. But someone goes to court. Remember, we are dealing with the law of succession. It is the law. What the clan says is considered as an opinion, and more often than not, it is rejected. If you go to court and you say the clan said such and such things, it is rejected because inheritance under the Kenyan system is governed by the Law of Succession Act, Cap 160. Any person who brings in customs or practices of a certain community really will not hold any water so long as the law the law has taken its course. That's how it works. Let me get questions from this side, please.
My name is Mercy Kihara, and my question is more related to that. But now, in this case, we have a joint account with my husband, yes, with good money, yes. And he happens to marry outside now. The other family haiko kwangu, lakini tuko na kila kitu. Money, joint account, hata gari nimepewa. So ni mtu anajulikana kona mali. So if he happens to die, the other family comes and claim. I don't think joint account yangu inaweza guzwa. What will happen because we are joint? The second question is that sometimes we have parents who get annoyed of their children when they are sick. Maybe there is a caretaker who used to take care of them, and he says that ile plot ile nini nimeachia huyu caretaker, and then the children wanakata after he dies. What is going to happen to the caretaker? Okay. And the other one is, sometimes as long as the law of succession is concerned, we do hear that when somebody ukikaa kwa mtu for 15 years, you have a chance that you can claim that land na useme ni yako. I don't know whether the law is fair, but there's something like that we were taught. And the other one is, you said that when one dies, na kuna mtu alikuwa na kesi yake, tuseme in form of money, na huyu amekufa, umesema watoto na wife watasukumia hiyo kesi, and then they say they are not aware what is going to happen to that person. Thank you.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Let me start with the last question. A person has a case and he dies. Let me use a simple example of a debt. Uko na kesi ya deni iko kotini, then you die. Then the children and the wife say they are not aware. It doesn't matter. They don't have to be aware of your liabilities for them to settle them. Too bad, but if it exists, it doesn't matter whether they are aware or not. They'll still have to bear that responsibility, because the purpose of the law of succession is to handle the assets and liabilities of a deceased person. When you balance the assets and liabilities of a deceased person, what you get is what is called a net estate, what you're supposed to share. You cannot take the property of a deceased person and leave the liabilities to take care of themselves. It doesn't work that way. So it really doesn't matter whether they knew or not. But I want to remind us something. Not all cases will follow the deceased person. There are some cases which cannot follow a deceased person. For instance, if the deceased person had a pending divorce case, that doesn't follow him. It dies with him. And there are quite a number of other cases where we say that it did not survive the death of the deceased person. Let's go to joint accounts. Joint accounts may arise because of joint businesses. If you have a joint account and it arises from joint business, then that is not a free property of the deceased. That is property owned jointly with other people, and it cannot follow within that category. Okay? So in that one, you're safe. But remember what I said is that every single situation comes with its own uniqueness. If it can be shown that you opened an account in your name and the name of a deceased person, but he's the one who was depositing money in that account, then there could be a question of whether that is your property or whether it's a property of the deceased. But that is a tentative situation. The thing we should take home is that joint property, including land held under joint names, more often than not does not form part of succession causes. I had a situation, I think, which I finished like a week ago, and there was a man who had registered a joint property with a girlfriend, and that was excluded from the Law of Succession Act. That is how it works. Let me go to your third situation. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your question is that someone has stayed on a piece of land for 15 years, and the argument is that it is his. No, it doesn't. It's not that simple. It is not that simple. Number one, it falls outside the Law of Succession Act, and it falls squarely within land law. And this is the rule. The rule is called adverse possession. If I invade your land, I get into your land without your permission, and I stay there, and you're seeing me staying there and you're doing nothing. I'm cultivating, I'm harvesting, I've built probably a shed for animals, and I take 12 years on that land, and you don't file any case to chase me from the land, then at the end of 12 years, the land becomes mine by way of adverse possession. That is the first principle. But, and this is very important, if you give me permission to remain on your land and plant crops and build sheds for animals and all that, even if it takes 100 years, for as long as I entered there with your permission, it cannot become mine by adverse possession. Number two, if I was your brother and you give me your land because I'm your brother, and I stayed on that land because of this filial relationship, family relationship, I cannot claim adverse possession because my entry was based on the blood relationship, and that is why you gave me permission to stay on that land. Okay? Now, third situation, if I entered on your land, but before 12 years expired, you had chased me, then I came back again, then you chased me again and filed cases in court stopping me from interfering, then 12 years cannot be said to have expired, and I cannot claim that land by adverse possession. It is a whole series of many questions which arise before I can be given a right to take your land by adverse possession. But again, that is land law. It falls slightly outside the Law of Succession. Now, your third question was in respect to, say, a caretaker who, on account of having taken care of as a person, akaambiwa, sasa wewe sababu umenisaidia sana, kale kaplot kako pale ni kako. But nothing was written. For as long as nothing was written, assuming it was written, it has to qualify to be a will. If it doesn't qualify to be a will, then there's a problem there. Because succession falls into two parts. Either there's a will or there's no will. If there's no will, what will happen is that this caretaker will come and produce the written document and say, nilikuwa nimepewa hii. But that is a question to be determined by the court. We cannot say conclusively now that the letter will hold as evidence that they were given that property. Again, there's a third aspect. There's something we call a gift by the deceased to a person. If that document qualifies to be a gift, then it will be excluded from the Law of Succession. But then a gift is something which has a very, very specific definition, right? Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've taken your role to allocate questions, but it's okay.
Thank you, Wakili Gidui. My name is Mary. I just want to divert kidogo from what you're telling us. The spouse is gone, and he has left you the title D and everything else. Now you want to change this title D, either in your name as a wife or in the name of the children. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to take so that this thing is changed to the name you want? Because at times you might feel that you want to sell part of it or to sell whatever you want to help you. And having the name of the deceased, it seems you are tied. What are you supposed to do? Where do you start? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that falls into the part of questions that I left, the procedure to be followed to inherit. Let me run through it very briefly. When he passes on and he leaves, say, a title deed, and you want to have it transferred to your name, there are several steps to be taken. Number one, you have to apply to court for letters of administration. And for you to do that, you will need a letter from the chief, and you will need a death certificate and a copy of that title. Then there are some forms that you're going to fill at the courts. And once you fill that form, an advertisement will appear in the Kenya Gazette. Remember, it's Kenya Gazette, not newspaper, not Daily Nation. It's the Kenya Gazette. Then when it comes, when the advertisement is made in the Kenya Gazette that so-and-so has passed on and he has left such and such things, then the court will give you letters of administration within 30 days, okay? When you get those letters, you will hold on for 6 months. The 6 months period is supposed to give room for anyone who wants to come and complain. After 6 months, you will again go to court, probably with your children, and tell the court that me and my children have agreed that this property is supposed to go to so-and-so, or it's supposed to be shared in XYZ fractions. You will get from court a document called a certificate of confirmation of grant. After you get that certificate, you will take it together with letters of administration and the Kenya Gazette, and you will take it to the lands office. At the lands office, they'll give you 2 forms to fill. Once you fill those forms, the title will be transferred from the deceased to your name, and your work will be complete. In case you want to do a subdivision, you will take the title that has been transferred into your names and the forms that were given to you at the lands office, take them to a surveyor who will subdivide and have the maps amended to reflect the portions which you've subdivided. In succession cases which are not complicated, it's a fairly straightforward process. Fairly straightforward. Yes. What's the question here? Yes.
Ithuĩ twĩna mũndũ ũmwe na mũirĩtu ũcio nĩ atecete mũno. Mũtumia nĩ ahikire, ahika agĩthũkũma indo nyingĩ mũno tondũ ena mĩgũnda ta 5 kana 10 na maburoti. No rĩu ndakĩrathimirwo nĩ ciana 2 arathimĩirwo kana kamwe. Rĩu kana kau kamwe nyina nĩ arakuire na agĩkua mamũingatire kũu makĩmwĩra athiĩ kũu ahikire. Makĩmĩtwara nginya kũu kairĩtu kau kahikire. Rĩu kairĩtu kau kahikire nĩko karamũroraga. Nyina wao nĩ mũtwe wathũkĩte. Rĩu araikarire mĩaka 10 arĩ o mũrwaru na matirokaga kũmũrora na matirokaga kũmũteithia. Rĩu rĩrĩa arakuire kũragĩtio kĩrĩa gĩake kĩrĩa angĩheo. Arauga no aheirwo atĩ kaburoti kamwe na nĩwe wĩkĩte atĩ mamu wao nĩwe ũtũrĩte nayo nake mĩaka 10 na mũrimũ ũcio nĩ ũyũ ũrĩa ũhana, nĩo maramũtwaraga thibitarĩ mageka atĩ. Rĩu niĩ aranjĩrire atĩ ingĩona handũ harario nĩ mũndũ wa thirikari ndĩmũrĩrie tondũ nĩ amakĩte mũno rĩu, tondũ mwanake ũcio rĩu aigĩrĩirwo mĩrigo na ti yake na akĩrĩ na mũthuri ũcio akĩrĩ mũtongu. Rĩu ena bata na mũtumia ũcio ũngĩ ahikirio tondũ nĩ agĩciarire ciana 8.
Okay, make sure nĩ ndanyita kĩũria gĩaku. Ũrĩa wakuire nĩ mũirĩtu, nĩ mũtumia, arĩ na indo, arĩ na kana kamwe na nĩ kairĩtu, na nĩ kahikire kũngĩ. Rĩu rĩrĩa ũyũ mũthũkũmi wa indo arakuire rĩ, mũirĩtu ũyũ mwana wa ũyũ ũkuĩte araingatwo. Ũyũ wakuire na nĩ ahikĩte. Okay, koguo no ithe muoyo. Okay. Okay. Wow. Has everyone understood, or can I put it? You've understood it. Ũndũ wa mbere, ũyũ wakuire rĩ, aratigire mũthuri na kairĩtu gaka marĩ nako, nĩguo? Ciana ena kana kamwe na mũthuri, na mũthuri. Okay. 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 Gũthiaga atĩrĩrĩ, ũyũ rakuire rĩ, kĩwatho gũtaragwo, aratigire mwana na mũthuri. Hau no wanyita. Indo ici aratigire rĩ, ciagĩrĩirwo kũgaywo nĩ mwana na ũyũ ratigarire. Okay? So ũyũ ciagĩrĩirwo kũgaywo nĩ mwana na mũthuri. Mũtumia ũyũ wathikirwo nĩ mũthuri, hau hatirĩ kĩndũ gĩake. Hau nĩ twanyitana. Mũirĩtu mwana ũyũ watigirwo nĩ ũyũ rakuire rĩ, ti kwĩhoya arehoya, agaĩrwo kĩwatho. Kĩwatho nĩ agĩrĩirwo kũgaĩrwo. Tukana wanyita? O nĩ kũrega araregire? Okay, ũrĩa tũngĩhota gũteithia mũirĩtu ũcio rĩ, nĩ gũtwarwo cira wa ũgai wa indo igoti-inĩ. Mũthee kwanja ambe arũgamio ndakagae ona kĩa indo icio ciratigirwo. Ũyũ ũratigirwo, ũyũ wena ciana rĩ, hau hatirĩ kĩndũ gĩake. Ciana ici cia mũtumia ũyũ rĩ, hatirĩ kĩndũ kĩao hau. Indo nĩ cia mũirĩtu ũyũ ũrerirwo nĩ ithe atĩ ndarĩ kĩndũ akũgaya, na ithe no agae. No ici ciana ingĩ rĩ, hatirĩ kĩndũ gĩake hau. Na ũndũ ũrĩa angĩhota gũteithĩka nĩ athiĩ igoti-inĩ. Gũtanathiĩ mũno rĩ, indo icio ciambe irũgamio itikagaywo nginya rĩrĩa igoti rĩkamũra kĩrĩa agĩrĩirwo kũgaya. Tukana wanyita? Nĩ agĩrĩirwo gũthiĩ igoti-inĩ, o kũngĩhoteka ona rua nĩguo kwambe kũrũgamio, gũtikagaywo kĩndũ nginya rĩrĩa akaheo igai rĩake. Tondũ ona weheretie atĩ nĩ akoretwo akĩrora nyina rĩrĩa ararĩ mũrwaru rĩ, we nĩ mwana wa mũtumia ũyũ ũrahurũkire. So amũrore kana atamũrore rĩ, nĩ agĩrĩirwo gũkorwo akĩgaya. Nĩ twanyitana? Nĩ agĩrĩirwo atware thitango igoti-inĩ nĩguo agaĩrwo igai rĩake. No igoti rikaga atiriri igoti ritigayaga kuringana na uria muthee arauga igoti rigayaga kuringana na uria watho ugite sawa sawa. Okay, I can take another question. I can take, I think, one final question. Sindio mchungaji? Allow me to take one final one. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Niĩ ngwenda kũria atĩrĩrĩ, niĩ ndĩroria hakwa, mũthuri wakwa kĩpass, nĩ ndathire all those succession grant ikiuma. Rĩu yauma ndathire ngĩandĩka properties. Either it was gari, ploti, mĩgũnda. No hau rĩrĩa na indo ikiuma. No ndioĩ shares. Ndacokire gũcikora fairo-inĩ. Ndioĩ shares atĩ nĩ part ya property. Gicoka kũria rĩ, ndĩrerwo atĩ nacio nĩ ndingĩa ciarĩ part ya property, koguo ndingĩalainire harĩa. Rĩu hau mũndũ ndingĩteithĩka atĩa tondũ ndioĩ.
Okay, ĩyo nĩ hũthũ. That is very easy. Mũndũ acokaga o igoti rĩu rĩagaire indo rĩ, mũndũ acokaga o kuo ukauga ndarehire ici kwĩ ici ndariganĩirwo, ndĩrenda mũciongerere na ndĩrenda cigayanio ũũ. Ukaheo marũa mangĩ merũ makuga indo iria ciariganĩire rĩ nĩcio ici na nĩciongererwo na ikugayanio kũringana na ũrĩa mũiguithanĩtie. Aca ti gũthitanga rĩngĩ o kĩrĩa nĩ application nini ĩthondekagwo, ũcokaga igoti-inĩ ũkehoya ũkauga marũa marĩa mwaheire rĩ macenjiei muongerere ici ingĩ. Never. Acha gutithiaga ũguo, although gũkũ ngĩceracera gũkũ street-inĩ gũkoragwo na andũ aingĩ mũno. Okay. Acha reke ngũ explain ire, ti complicated. Thaa icio na wĩ gũkũ rĩ, mũndũ ndarathiĩ Nairobi kũbaira, tũramabaira na computer, ũgathikĩrĩrio na computer na ũkaheo marũa maku computer-inĩ. So gũtirĩ gwĩka. Yeah, no kuongererwo ti ũndũ mũritũ. Sawa. I think that's enough. That's enough.
Okay, my name is Monica Irimo na nitaongea kwa Kiswahili. Nilikuwa nauliza swali moja, kuna ya my dad na kuna ya my mom, wote ni deceased. Kwa my dad haiko na shamba kubwa sana na my sister ni mkubwa kuniliko. Aliniambia ati mimi siwezi pata kitu yote kwa sababu nimeolewa. Ya pili ni kwa my mom. My mom aliacha, pia iko na shamba na kuna topic aliacha ya pesa somewhere na akasema ati hiyo ni sweat yake ndio yenye tunafaa nipiganie. Ya tatu, mimi kwenye my mama anakaa haiko na ploti. Nilienda huko after my mama amezikwa kama siku 2 wakanifukuza. Sasa sikujua ni kwa nini, niko na right yote ama sina.
Okay. Allow me to answer this as the final question and to give you the best detail possible. Wacha nikuelewe swali ya kwanza. Sister yako alikuambia hauna right ya kugawa sababu umeolewa. Forget about that. Kama kutawezekana mupeleke mashtaka kotini ya kufuata hiyo urithi, wewe utagawa kama kila mtu mwingine. Ile shida inakuwa hapa ni ati hata ukitoka pale kwa street utapata mtu atakupea mambo ya sheria. Hiyo wamejaa huku. Every shopping center, every corner shop utapata mtu akukupea hadithi ya vile succession inafanywa. Lakini ukitaka upewe mawaidha ya sawa, either ukuje kwa wakili ama uende kwa public trustee hapa kwa ofisi ya PC. Uende kwa public trustee atakupea mawaidha. It's cheaper kwa public trustee, kwa wakili it's a little bit more expensive. Lakini kama ungeweza utafute mawaidha ya sawa. Hiyo kuambiwa hauwezi rithi sababu umeolewa, hakuna kitu kama hiyo. Swali ya pili ni rudia tena, sikushika vizuri na uongee ukiwa composed ndio niweze kuielewa vizuri.
Okay, swali ya pili ni my mom. My mom iko na ploti na huko kwenye anakaa ndo kwenye mimi nimelelewa. But vile alikufa within 2 days walinifukuza wakaniambia ati sifai kwenda huko na sifai kukaa hapo.
Okay. Ni nani walikufukuza?
Kuna ndugu yangu alikufukuza.
Okay. Title iko na jina ya mama yako?
title sijui, juu dada yangu ndio yuko nazo huyo mkubwa.
Okay. The most important thing ni kujua title iko na jina ya nani. Sababu kama title haiko na jina ya mama yako, then hapo kuna shida.
Iko na jina ya mamangu.
Lakini kama title iko na jina ya mama yako, hiyo tunaweza deal nayo, hiyo ni rahisi sana. Hakuna mtu ako na right ya kugawa kubwa kuliko ya mwenzake. Kama nyinyi wote ni watoto wa mama mmoja, kila mtu ako na haki ya kurithi. Sawa? Yeah. Ile kitu inafinyilia watu ni ukifinyiliwa huko, unakaa hivyo tu, au uchukui hatua yoyote. Sawa? Okay, let me end it there because I know this debate can go on, it can go on and on and on. So, let me say this. I'm really, really grateful that you gave me this opportunity. Of course, my Sunday afternoon, I think I'll be lying on the couch and watching television. But giving me this chance, I don't take it for granted. Thank you very much. It is the only chance I get to share legal knowledge outside the framework of a court situation. And you realize also that 90% of the answers that I give are answers connected with court because that's the only thing I know. I've been practicing law for this is my 24th year. So I don't know how to give answers in a different way. So you'll excuse me for that. But I trust this is an ongoing debate so that even before our situations arise, if we can be able to plan our estates well in advance, we can avoid 90% of these problems. The gentleman right there asked me about a will. That is the other bigger part that I'd want us to address, probably in the future if we ever get a chance, so that we can be able to address issues in a constructive and an organized way. Thank you very much once again. Thank you again, Millicent, at least for giving us this opportunity. And I'm really grateful.
Wakili, we're also very, very grateful. Before we give the vote of thanks, members, what was Christian education? Please kujeni mbele. All members. So Wakili, this is the group that has invited you. We are a bigger team. Some have apologies. We have an elder, a patron amongst us, had an apology for this afternoon. I'm Jane Wahome, the chair. Then we have here on my right, we have Steve, I think he's the one who called you, our able treasurer. This is Stephen Karanja. We have Patricia Joki, a C member. We have Lois Bett, a C member. We have from the districts. You are from PCA, so you understand the districts. Okay. We have Mercy Moraya. Then on this side, we have Jane Goge, who is our vice. And then we have Jennifer, also a C member. So we thank you. This is our team.
Praise God. Yeah, I would like to give a vote of thanks on behalf of my team here. First, nashukuru Mungu kwa sababu ya wakati huu. Ya pili, nataka kushukuru kanisa kupitia kwa mchungaji wetu kwa kuturuhusu tuwe hapa wakati kama huu na pia kuleta wakili. Tunakushukuru sana. Give our special thanks through you to our LCC. Christian education through our able chair, Madam Jane. Tunamshukuru pia. This season tumeona maneno mengi yamefanyika na ninafikiri kama kanisa tunafurahia. Wakili, thank you for agreeing to come. I've met with you before lakini huwezi jua. We have met somewhere. Na tunasema masomo hayaishi. Today nimejua kuna presumption wife. Ambaye sikuwa ninajua. Na pia nimejua matriarcho na patriarcho. So learning does not stop. Learning inaendelea hata tukiwa wazee na pengine itaishia kaburini. So tunakushukuru sana kwa kukubali mwaliko wetu. Na ninafikiria sisi kama kanisa tunakubali ya kuwa tutakualika tena. So that you can continue with the other part. Kwa sababu inakaa that is the sensitive part. Na most of all tunashukuru Mungu na nyinyi pia members for agreeing to be here. Kama vile wakili amesema, we could have been elsewhere. Maybe tukiwatch TV, maybe a family outing, or even hata kulala. Lakini uliamua kuja na tunakushukuru sana. Mungu awabariki. na mnapoenda nyumbani muende na salamu zetu kama wana CE, na wakati mwingine tukiwaita tafadhali muje. Asanteni sana, Mungu awabariki.
Thank you, CE team. Biblia inasema my people perish because of lack of knowledge. But we thank God for that platform. Si ni kweli? Si we've learned something. And I believe tumekuwa sharpened in that line. And tukitoka hapa we will be better people than we came in. Si ni kweli? Mchungaji tu kitu mimi ningeomba ni wazee wa PCMF ama wazee wa baba hii kanisa akiwa waone kando. Hii ni mambo yao na wayuko. Asante. Kuja tufungie kwa maombi.
Okay. Na ushuge sana unaweza sema uwaone wakuone. So thank you so much. Mimi sina mengi, but I've been an advocate of praying for him, doing the things the right way. Wakati wakili alikuwa nasema haya, na vile alimesema ni kweli. I think we need specifically to have men. At times I don't keep my secrets, and I've been telling them I'm a product of your familia ya watu wengi. And one of the things that I have realized is when the owner of the property is sober and right, the person can prevent a lot of problems. Wakili nimewambia kwamba I come from a polygamous family, and my dad divided the property because in his thinking he thought he would die before his wives, okay, my mother's. I'm just saying his wives so that you can understand. But unfortunately, my mother's died before him. So I want to tell you that we have enjoyed a lot of peace. Because you see, kujipanga kuweka yale muoyo na akakemewa na wasee sana. Atawadhi kuweka wale muoyo gani kuaga ki. So I'm just for me even me I say prayerfully my children will not fight over my property. Because again I'm telling today sisi manyumba yote tunakaa tu hivyo bila stress. Because we are clear. Sababu alikawia wake zake. Okay, I'm saying not disrespect, I'm saying wake zake our mothers they were good. Tuliishi na wao vizuri. Kwa hivyo I was just trying to imagine kama hangefanya hivyo na sasa anyway. So even for the men it's also good kujipanga mapema. Acha kusema ati nikigawa itakuwa nini. Of course there are so many other factors to consider, but it's also good. Sababu ukisikia kesi nyingine kama hizo for us na alikuwa ametafuta mali kiasi hakuna mtu anaulizana na mwingine kitu, nothing. And actually that also perpetuates love, because I have no hatred for my brothers, my step brothers, my sisters, my step sisters. Wengine kuna wengine hapa wanajua hivyo, you cannot even tell that we are steps. Tunachikana tu hivyo, tunapedana. But again, kuna familia mengine. So I think you should also be told lighting a will is not tikuthetha gikuo. Kuandika will tikuthetha gikuo. Because you eventually die. I remember personally kwa sababu mimi niko kule chini. I faced my father on the phone kauni na nikitaka kuuza mali yako. Kaniambia si ni yako, si uuze mapema. Ukienda vizuri mimi na si ni yako. You know, I'm just saying that there is a relationship that men our parents can have. Inaweza kutusaidia. Because sasa akininyima nisiuze akiwa hai, si hata kifa anaweza uza. Si afadhali anibariki ama anishauri, isn't it? So for me I'm grateful, I thank God for that, and I do pray that sote tutabarikiwa. Tusimame sote tuweze kushukuru Mungu kwa hayo. Let us pray. Mungu Baba, katika jina la Yesu Kristo tunasema ni asante kwa sababu ya huo ujumbe, hayo masomo. Tunaomba yakawa msaada kwa kila mmoja wetu, na wale ambao wako na changamoto ya kisheria tunaomba Mungu ukawawezeshe kutafuta ushauri pahali ambapo panafaa. Bwana wakili tuamkabidhi mikononi mwako, tukiomba ukaendelea kumbariki katika kazi yake, na pia Mungu Baba katika kazi kama hii ya ushauri ambao itakuwa msaada kwa wengine. Na wale ambao wako na cases ambao wako na shida, pia tunakuomba ukawawezesha kuzitatua. Tunapofumukana tunaomba uwepo wako ukaenenda nasi, na hayo yote tunaomba kwa imani, na ni katika jina la Yesu Kristo tumeomba na kuamini. Amen. Now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and forevermore. Amen. God bless you.
So members wa Christian Education, tabaki kidogo tafadhali. Christian Education members, tutabaki briefly.